We want to welcome you guys to the Eat Your Feelings Masterclass hosted by myself and Moises. So this is our community. This is our VidaProject community. And so we just want to first welcome you. We also want to congratulate and acknowledge the fact that you're here. The curiosity that it took for you to be here, the courage that it also took for you to be here to learn how to improve your relationship with food. So let's talk about how you got here. So
how we all got
here, essentially, right? So you saw the flyer, Eat Your Feelings, and maybe in that moment you were like, oh, snap. I just ate a bag of chips, or I ate the whole tray of cookies the other day, or I do eat the whole tub of ice cream when I'm feeling emotional, or you were doing it in that very moment. Either way, you felt guilty as charged and possibly felt personally attacked.
Probably felt like shit.
Essentially,
yeah.
You felt like shit. But that's perfect, because today what we're going to do is learn about emotions and how they play a huge role in our nutrition. But first, we want to set a huge disclaimer. Today, guys, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to teach you how to feel. So if you are one of those people who is looking for information on what to do, this masterclass is not for you. We're going to talk about emotions and how they play a huge role in our nutrition. And with that information, learn how it can serve and empower you to creating meaningful and lasting changes in your diet and nutrition.
Yeah, that's super important. I'm glad you said that, because anything here that we do at VidaProject is all about emotions. It's about understanding you, the individual, the person. That's what matters here the most at VidaProject. So that's why if you're looking for, I'm going to do step 1, step 2, step 3. It's not going to work for you, because we don't function here that way. We're talking about long, life-lasting transformations. That's why if you're looking for that, this is not for you. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get right into it. The agenda for today. So today we're going to talk about what are emotions. We're going to talk about the emotional versus the logical brain. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about the emotional equation. And then we're going to talk about what you can actually start implementing to create and understand emotions and feelings. And then we're going to take about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&As. We're going to take any of your questions that you may have about any of the topics that we discussed and answer them. And then at the end, we'll leave about 10 minutes after the class is officially done. So if you have any personal questions about your personal nutrition and your emotional state, Evelyn and I will answer some of those questions. So before we get started, before we tell them, a little bit about ourselves, I want to let you guys know that we have a very powerful and amazing community called MightyNetworks. This is where a lot of our coaches, all of our coaches actually, go on there, put powerful content, habits, perceptions, ideas, concepts, where we're all sharing, learning how to transform. Yeah. And the great part about it, we also have a bunch of members, just like yourself, who are interested in creating transformation, long life-lasting transformation. And this community is very, very powerful. So Bev Meister, can you send that link for everybody so that they can jump on and jump into our community?
Yeah. Basically what we're doing now, this conversation, it's really all conversation. It's how we learn, it's how we grow, that's how we connect. And that's exactly what that's for. So first things first.
I think they should know who we are. Like, why the hell should you guys listen to us? So Evelyn, why don't you tell them your story? Why us? Why should you listen to anybody from VidaProject?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I came to VidaProject about a year ago. Prior to coming to VidaProject, I had about 5 years. Well, first I got my degree in nutrition and food science, and then I had about 5 years of coaching and training, and a bit of mindset work with my minor in psychology. But it wasn't until I met Francis, who's the CEO of VidaProject, and Moises, and I learned about emotions. And I learned about how to handle my emotions. I learned about how they play a huge role in my entire life and decisions that I make, and in any transformation I'm trying to achieve. So we took everything that we knew, myself, Moises, and Francis, and we put it into our sick-ass, kick-ass, bite-by-bite nutrition program. So I was the test dummy through it, right? Why sell something that we aren't sure that works yet? So I was a part of that process. And initially, in the very beginning of the program, believe it or not, this might be a shock to all of you guys, we don't really do any nutritional changes. The first couple weeks of the program, it's really all about that work, how to dive deep into your emotions, how to start recognizing them, being aware of them, discovering what they mean. And so when I did that work at the very beginning of the program, and I got a grip of my emotions, I had developed in that area now, I was able to take what happens later on in the program, because it stacks week by week, it gets a little more intense, which does require discipline, which does require willpower with those heavy nutritional changes. I combined the two. You had the perfect recipe for success. I lost 16 pounds from the program. I felt great. But the real prize was the empowerment that I got from being able to have a grip over my emotions. When I understood that, I was like, oh shit, okay, like I get it. And I was able to apply it in the rest of my coaching, whether I was training somebody, whether it was nutrition coaching, whether it was mindset development. I was able to apply that concept of how emotions really drive everything for us. I became a transformation coach here, and now currently I'm a partner here at VidaProject.
Yeah, so I think that's great because, for me, it's a very similar story, and it all falls back into the emotion and how powerful emotions actually are. So for me, I had my backgrounds in teaching. I was a teacher in New York City for 10 years. I was a basketball coach as well, and I got my master's degree in education and a minor in psychology. So when I decided to actually leave my job, right, in that moment, I wasn't actually aware or didn't have the awareness to understand the emotion, the driver for leaving $80,000 to come here, build something from scratch, not make anything with Rances and build a team together. There was an emotion behind that. And I didn't understand those emotions or why I was making the decisions I was making. So, working with Rances and then Evelyn jumping on board, we started to learn about nutrition, and something so basic, so simple as putting something into your mouth that's going to give you energy. We think it's something that is not difficult, but it is very difficult because there's a lot of awareness. There's an emotional attachment to every single food we eat. So for me, when I decided to actually change my nutrition, you're talking about a kid, bodega kid, a kid who literally went and ate chocolate and chips, all that stuff. I grew up that way. There were emotional attachments to those foods, and I did not understand it. So me creating the discipline and understanding of why I'm eating these foods was very powerful. And that translated into, the decisions that I made here at VidaProject and the decisions that we make with our team, because emotions are a powerful driver. And this is the big, the most powerful component of the Bite by Bite program, because once you understand your emotions, you have control over everything. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I mean, especially what we have on our shirts here, becoming limitless, right? That's what we do here in our community in the whole, not just with the nutrition program, but with everything that we do. We combine that aspect to it, and clients get a completely different experience. They're like, wow, I never felt this way before. Wow, I've done all this previous training, or wow, I've done all these different nutrition programs, and it finally has clicked for me. And I think that's the magic for us, because we understood it ourselves, we went through it ourselves, and now we can give it to others. And that's what we do here every single day.
Yeah, every single day. If you're a part of this community, if you're part of this culture, you know that you're dealing with your emotions every single day. And to be honest, it's what actually creates change. And this is why Evelyn and I decided to create this Eat Your Feelings Masterclass, because we know how important it is to actually make change. I'm sure a lot of you, well, let's be honest, you're here because the things that you did before didn't work for you. Right? So you're trying to figure out a new way. And the reason that action has an emotion behind it, there are stories behind it, there's a perception about yourself in the world, and that actually drives us to take action. So now when we actually start to understand our emotions, we can make conscious decisions about our life, our choices, and actually start moving in a direction where we get to create a new version of ourselves, a more powerful and limitless version of ourselves.
And I think that goes with the definition of emotions, Mo.
Yeah, for sure. So what are emotions? Well, emotions are just suggestions that allow us to perceive and act in a certain way in the world. Right? So what does that actually mean?
So for example, have we all been through a breakup? Have we all been broken up with? Sorry, no shame. It's all good. We've all been there, right? So when you go through a breakup, you have a perception of that breakup. If somebody breaks up with me, I'm going to say, you suck. And then now I feel like I suck. There's a part of me that failed. I'm not enough because this person doesn't want to be with me. Or something about me that makes me feel an emotion, right? I don't feel enough. So that's my perception. That's my emotion. Then what I'm going to do is act on that. I might eat my feelings. I might go to the store and buy a bunch of snacks to make myself feel better. Or I might say, shit, I don't want to feel this way anymore, and do something to serve and empower me, right? So that's the awareness in it. So that's probably the most relatable way to describe emotions, our perception of those emotions, and a reaction towards that. What we're trying to do is get you to acknowledge that emotion in between so that that action aligns with what you desire.
And I think the most important thing in that story is that, and what I said before, was that emotion is a suggestion.
Yeah.
And this is what we really need to understand, is that a suggestion is just kind of like advice. It doesn't mean that you have to accept it. It just means that you have to understand it. So let's talk about how the human system works, the brain itself, right? We have, let's put it this way, we have an emotional brain and we have a logical brain. And I want to give an example, and I want you guys to bear with me, see if you can understand this, is imagine that your emotional brain is an elephant. And when we think about an elephant, we think about this huge, massive, powerful creature that has the ability to destroy villages when you kill one of their calves or babies, right? Or, you know, they can jump into a circus and do a bunch of tricks, right? Or you can not feed them forever and they fall into the ground and they become a victim and they follow whatever the person tells them to do. Our emotions play the same way. They act in the same way. They're very, very powerful, a very powerful tool and way of thinking that allows human beings to survive. Now, the logical brain is our conscious brain, the way that we start to perceive the world, the way that the decisions that we want to make in our lives. The rules that we give ourselves, the beliefs, the stories, all of those things, right? They all intertwine, but it's what we want. We tend to make goals, right? Nutritional goals. We make those goals from our logical brain, right? And it stems from the emotion, because there's an emotion under there that's asking your logical brain to make a decision. So the logical brain, we want to think about it as a rider, the guy who's trying to control, or female, trying to control the elephant. So if the logical brain and the rider and the elephant aren't on the same page, we're going to have different reactions, right? So for example, let's go back to that breakup. If someone breaks up with you, you have a decision. You can react in a way where you're very visceral. Your emotions take control and you know what, fuck you. And you start throwing a cup at them and you miss, so then you go and run at them, like, no, don't leave me, right? There's all these different things that you can do based off of emotion. The same reaction, we can have a completely different reaction where we go and we say, oh no, we're a victim, they don't love me, I hate myself, I'm gonna eat this whole ice cream, right? What that means is that for every single emotion that we feel, there's an action that's gonna happen. And this goes into Newton's law of emotion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite emotional reaction. And I think one of the great stories, Evelyn, I think is the one that you told me about, your meditation journaling, how it's important to understand that emotion.
Yeah, so a couple years back, before I started meditating, before I started journaling, I was reading books and I was listening to podcasts, also mentors telling me, you know, this is a great way to gain awareness. It's a great way to start understanding your emotions. So my intentions were pure, picking up these habits, and it worked. And then after a while, I got to the point where I'm like, there was resistance and I couldn't understand. I'm like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling like there's a level of resistance here? Why does this feel like a task? Why does this feel like a chore, right? I'm sure many of you have experienced other nutritional programs where you get to the point, you're so excited, and then once you're told what to do, you're like, I don't really want to do that. It becomes a task out of nowhere, it becomes a chore. It's something else you have to check off your list. And that's essentially what happened with my meditating and my journaling. And it wasn't until I took a step back and used my awareness and I was like, okay, something's not aligned here, right? That logical brain. I have always used my logical brain my entire life. It's just my childhood, the way that I was raised is very disciplined and structured. It shows before I came to VidaProject as a coach, I was a nutrition coach already. I was a trainer. I was doing all the right things, you know, and the same thing was happening with the meditating and the journaling. And I was like, something is off here. So I took a step back and I realized that I was only doing it because my logical brain was essentially in the front seat, the driver of my life. And the emotions that came out of that were guilt and shame. I was only doing it because I felt guilty, because I'm like, well, I'm not following the structure. I'm not staying disciplined, right? The logical brain is basically what the logical brain is telling me. And I think that a lot of other people experience that in nutrition programs. Unfortunately, it's driven by guilt. It's driven by shame. If you don't do this, then you're doing it all wrong, right? But there's no alignment there with your emotional brain and your logical brain. There's no, hey, let's really uncover these emotions. Let's really create the space right? To figure out what this means and what this is. And so until I took that step back, I did create that alignment, and now it's serving me. Now it's empowering me. And so that's me sort of with the meditating and the journaling.
I think you made a great point there in where if we use too much of one side of the brain, if we use too much of the logical brain, or too much of the emotional brain, it's not going to serve us. Right. So for Evelyn, in her example and her story, you talk about how your life was very structured. Yeah. It was using the logical brain, and a lot of us go to school and we tend to use our logical brain a lot because we're trying to achieve a certain aspect. We're trying to achieve a certain result.
There's good intention. There's definitely good intention. It started with a positive emotion. This is going to help me achieve this.
Exactly. You know? We have that emotion to become something else, right? But the thing in your story that was so amazing that you said was that there was shame and guilt. And what happens is if our logical brain takes the control, full control of the entire way that you go about doing something, then what happens is we start to avoid that shame and guilt. And now you're trying to implement all these methods. Well, I'm going to start meditating, I'm going to journal, and then my life is going to be figured out. No, the reason is because human beings are not logical creatures. We're actually very, very emotional creatures. And because we're that emotion drives action. You're not going to take control. You're not going to want to do something. You're not going to want to eat that salad or want to eat those vegetables or go to the gym, and there's no actual real intention, real emotion. So, I'm assuming here, but when you actually went into that space of like, hey, let me take a look at this guilt and shame, then it started to bring the real intention of like, oh, these are the emotions that are driving the actions, right? And I think that's super important.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, I feel that a lot of people experience that. And then you do really great for like 3 months, maybe 4 months, 5, you're killing it. And then you run into this roadblock, right? You start to plateau. Something's not working.
Yeah.
And this is the solution right here is what we're telling you. So we present to you the emotional equation.
And before I want to, because that's a really good point, that when we run into that roadblock, that's willpower.
Right.
And that's something that we talk about in the Bite by Bite program. It's willpower, right? Willpower, we only have so much. Right. It's a skill. Just like if you didn't grow up like Evelyn, where you had that structure and that discipline, you may not have as much willpower. But if you grew up like that, that's a skill that you can utilize and implement, but it can only last so long. Why? Because willpower takes physical calories out, takes effort, energy. And that's super important because you're going to use that energy, right, to make decisions. We want to make decisions to, with our work, with our relationships, with those things. We don't want to make decisions about food. So it's very, very important. So this leads us to the emotional equation. So perception leads to the emotion, leads to reaction. I'm going to break it down in the simplest way possible.
That's the way that we're programmed.
Yes.
This is what we're trying to change.
Yeah, so we got to change it. So for example, we see the world in a certain way. The way that we see this world is going to give us a bunch of information into our bodies and our brain. That information is going to create an emotion, which then that emotion creates an action. Okay, just like I said, an equal and opposite emotional reaction to whatever we're perceiving. So now, what is an example that we can give to this? Well, let's take a look at a baby. So Francis gave me this example the other day. So if a baby actually, they don't have any information, they don't know anything about the world, they got no stories, no memories, no trauma, they're clean, right? So now they go in, they're playing, and they hit their head on the table. And I'm sure many of you have seen this, especially if your mother's, the baby goes and is confused. And is looking and is waiting and saying, like, what happened? And then it starts to receive the information. And then it says, oh, wow, this is not a good feeling, right? And it says, oh, this emotion is not good. So then it creates an opposite emotion or reaction to that emotion so that it can feel good again, right? So the baby can feel good again. So what does the baby do? It starts crying, mommy, right? My head, right? Same thing happens with human beings. The only thing is that with human beings, that processing time that I talked about with the baby, it shrinks. So the baby doesn't understand the world. It has no stories, no information, no concept of what it just went through. But as we get older, we start to experience different things. We have different stories. We have more information. So that space between how we view things and what we feel shrinks. And what happens is that now we become, because we're trying to survive, we're trying to use that emotion to make a decision. So think about today. In today's world, right, we have buildings, we have supermarkets, we have a bunch of things that make our lives comfortable. When we were hunter-gatherers, right, we didn't have those things. So that space between what we view in the world and our emotion had to shrink as we get older, because if we were standing in front of a tiger, right, and we saw a tiger, oh, there's a tiger. What does this mean? Okay. Oh shit, scared? Let me run, right? That doesn't make sense. So we have information that leads us to close that gap between perception and emotion so that we can create an action based on survival, just strictly to survive.
The only difference between that baby and us is the experiences in our lives, the stories in our lives, the emotions, the attachment we have in our lives, right? Because, for example, let's say we take that same scenario with one of us, right? And I hit my head, I bumped my head on the wall, but a couple months ago, the same person left that ball there for me to hit my head, right? So I'm going to attach that story to that. I'm like, damn, you did it again, you hit me again, right? So I'm going to have a different reaction compared to the baby that doesn't have that. So it's just perceiving it however it can in that moment to achieve safety, right? To achieve comfort. So that's the difference between a baby and us. There's really no difference besides the stories and the perceptions and everything that we create in our lives as we continue to grow older. So we have all this, and then year by year, decade by decade, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And what we're trying to do is open that back up.
So that space that Evelyn is talking about is awareness. When we start to question our perception of the world, right, we can now question the emotion, because like I said in the beginning, emotion is just a suggestion. It's not true. It does not mean that just because you had a stressful day at work, that it was a bad day.
Right.
It does not mean that we need to go and eat the ice cream to make us feel better. So we know that when we have a stressful day at work, we're perceiving that day a certain way. That perception is also coming from our emotion, which those emotions, Newton's second law of emotions. And guys, when I say Newton's second law of emotions, Mark Manson, he wrote a book called How Everything is Fucked. And he talks about Newton's law and how Newton was a very disturbed child, very antisocial, very depressed. He was very in his emotions. And basically he took the 3 laws of motion and he converted it into an analogy for emotions. So the second law of emotion is that all of your emotions, your identity, who you believe you are, is the sum of those emotions, right? So all of the stories, all of the experiences, everything that you know is what you believe you are. So this is very powerful, because now when we start to question our perception, when we start to question who we are and our stories, and if they're really true, whatever that means to you, then we can start to understand the emotions behind those stories. And when we start to understand those emotions, we can create different actions, behaviors that align with the emotion and what we want. So the whole point of the emotional equation is to get your emotional brain and your thinking brain to be on the same page.
Right. And I think with what you said is it's like right on the nail, because with Eat Your Feelings, right, eating your feelings, and with the Bite by Bite program, that's, or other right, not necessarily Bite by Bite, but other programs that you've done in the past, when you get to that roadblock, there's an emotion that gets created in that roadblock. Absolutely. You're like, and then in that emotion, you feel defeated. You feel like you're not enough. You feel that you just don't have what it takes to achieve this goal, right? And then that creates a perception. I will never be able to achieve my goals. I will never be able to achieve nutrition. I will never be able to achieve a healthy body, or whatever your goals are. And unfortunately, it becomes so fixed, because again, when you don't have that awareness, that's it. That's the lens that you're walking through in life. This is my truth.
100%,
right?
100% right. One thing that I say here to everybody is intent over results. Intent over results. Your intentions behind what you want to do are way more important than what you get out of it. So if you ever come to VidaProject, you do one of our fitness classes, our personal development, or even the Bite by Bite program, we are looking for intention. We are not looking for this sculpted, muscular, beautiful person that you think you want to be.
Yeah.
We're looking for the intention. I want to feel differently. I want to feel amazing and great about myself. When we focus on that emotion and we try to create that emotion, right, by changing our perception of the world, the way that we see things and see experiences in our life, then we create new actions that have so much power behind it. Because when you put emotion behind that action, there's no failure. You're going to do it. Even if you mess up one day, you ate a piece of cake, the next day you're going to get right back up and go back to the thing. And I think one story that you have, Evelyn, is a perfect example of this, in how awareness with your emotions are so powerful.
Yeah. So when I came to VidaProject, I was working at another job. I was managing another facility, and I had recently quit my job. Honestly, it was like 4 months ago, maybe now. And that was tough for me. That was an identity shift entirely. I was heavily involved with that place for 4 years. I identified with that place. People say, Evelyn, what do you do? Oh, I work here. Like, that's what I do. That's who I am. You know, the people, everything. So it was a complete, what we call here, an ego death. Like, just a part of me was gone, right? And so that created a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos with my emotions. And so I remember leaving there, and I went straight to 7-Eleven. It was the quickest thing around me. And I was just like, I need some instant gratification right now to comfort my feelings, to comfort my emotions. And I came here and I cried. And I cried to Moses, and Mo was like, that's a lot of snacks, Ev. And I was like, yeah, it is. But with my awareness, I'm like, I'm okay with it. I know that what I'm trying to achieve right here with these snacks, I know that it's not going to necessarily long-term make me feel great. Maybe not even in a couple hours. My stomach might start hurting. But I knew in that moment that, hey, it's okay. I have the awareness. I know how to pick this back up. And I am seeking just comfort right now. I am seeking that, that pleasure with food. So that was the beauty of that moment, like you're saying, because I had that awareness, and I can eat my feelings too. Yeah. In awareness, right? This isn't to say that you're never gonna not eat your feelings. You're never gonna not have your favorite cake again. You're never gonna not, go on, have date night with your spouse and have your favorite dessert, whatever the case may be. Like, that's not life. That's not true living, right? And so what we're trying to help you gain here is just awareness. And when you have those moments, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. There's no guilt. There's no shame,
Actually, the first 2 weeks of the program is exactly that. We want you to go into that space of understanding your emotions, understanding and creating awareness. What Evelyn did in that moment was she used awareness to understand her feelings. And whatever way we start to understand our feelings is our way. We are going to have different ways. Just because, Evelyn did it one way doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You have to figure out your way. And the only way you're going to figure that method out is when you start to dive into the emotions. And that's what Evelyn did. She went into there, she brought the whole entire 7-Eleven in here, and she started eating her face off. And I was like, all right, just make sure nobody sees this, and you're not going to buy the program. And that's pretty crazy, right? But the thing is about the program is that, like Evelyn said, we are humans, and food is very powerful. It brings people together. It allows you to enjoy conversation. It allows you to understand your emotions. It's when we miss that space between perception, how we view something, and the actual emotion behind that experience. When we don't have that space, that's when we start to fall into reacting. Right. We want to create a response. We want to create an action, an aligned action with our emotion. That's when it becomes powerful. Yeah. So essentially the equation you're trying to achieve is emotion, but with awareness. Yes. Which can help you perceive the world in different ways, right? It gives you options to say, what am I feeling and why? And you have all these options of why you might be feeling the way you're feeling. That's the perception, right? And then you have aligned action. Because you can't be with just your emotional brain. It's chaotic. Yeah. Right? And even if you're in that emotional brain, it's not necessarily aligned with what you want to feel. For example, my guilt and shame. You can also just be in the driver's seat with your logical brain, because you'll be me. You'll find yourself being like me, where I'm just thriving and functioning off of willpower and discipline, but then I'm drained and I don't understand what why I'm feeling this way. I'm doing everything right. I'm checking everything off the list,
right? So it can go either way. And what you want to do is create that unison, create that harmony between your emotional brain and your logical brain.
And the thing with emotion that's even more powerful, it starts to give us hope.
Yeah.
And I think that we tend to underestimate what hope does for us. Hope actually gives us a driver to change something. When you guys are here, the reason that you guys are here is because you have hope. Either you know Evelyn or myself, or you know Rancis, because of VidaProject, you know what we do here, and that gives you a little bit of hope. But when you start to transfer that hope to within, when you start validating yourself from within, and you start to understand your emotions, that hope is the one thing that's going to keep you going. And then when you start to align your goals and the ideas of who you want to be with your emotions, transformation will occur. It will not fail. You will achieve it. And that's why the Bite by Bite program is super, super powerful, because everything that we do there, especially in the beginning, is all about understanding you, the individual, because we're all different.
All different, and one's shoe size does not fit all, and that's the thing too, right? Most people go into programs and there's so many, the demographic is so different, right? You might have somebody who's somebody who has had experience with nutrition before, somebody who hasn't, somebody who has trauma, somebody who hasn't, right? Somebody who has already these stories around what nutrition is, and that's why we tell people you got to go into this with a clean slate again, going back to that baby, right? That kind of baby childlike mindset where you're going into it with a clean slate so that you can gain that awareness and then succeed in anything, that you do.
Exactly. So the big thing here to leave with like today, like once we start to open the floor to the Q&A, is awareness. Like, what is awareness? So Evelyn, what were some approaches you took to developing your awareness?
So within the Bite by Bite, it really started with Bite by Bite. And it was essentially literally analyzing my eating patterns and my habits, my relationships with food, bite by bite. Like, why do I want this food right now? Okay, second bite, third bite. How am I feeling now that I have the food? Is it really is it giving me pleasure? Is it giving me joy? Is it giving me that excitement that I was looking for? And then how do I feel afterwards? Do I feel like shit? Do I feel that joy that I thought I was seeking or that I thought I was going to achieve in the beginning of that meal? So it was really taking it step by step and implementing, that awareness every single day, day in and day out, questioning literally everything that I did. And when you have the space to do that, the empowerment that comes from within, because it's like, I know myself, I'm in touch with myself, I'm in touch with my actions, and everything is aligned, and I'm in tune with myself and my relationship to food, my environment, the people around me. I mean, what you can do after that is just absolutely incredible.
And I think one thing that you said is like awareness, the guilt and shame. When we think of guilt and shame, we think of like this negative feeling.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to understand that awareness comes without judgment of that emotion. And when you come in there just analyzing, just looking at that guilt and shame. So I know we've all done it. I think I did it yesterday, right? Like not yesterday, maybe this morning when I ate that coffee cake, right? You go and you eat this thing, right? And then you're like, why did I eat that? Why did I do that? And you feel that guilt and shame. Most people will feel bad for like a good, maybe 5 seconds. We're like, whatever, it's okay. I'll start Monday, right? And give ourselves that logical brain starts to say, don't worry about it. We'll start Monday.
Yeah.
Right. So then we go in and we don't necessarily go into that space of like, why do I feel guilty about eating this food right now?
Right.
Why do I feel shame? When you start to look into that space, you're going to start creating a logical way to say, hey, I'm doing this not because I want to, because I'm reacting to this emotion the way that I'm feeling about myself. When you make a decision, like I made the coffee cake decision this morning, I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a coffee cake and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to really enjoy it. I'm going to really appreciate that food, right? And that actually creates a more impactful and positive relationship with food.
Yeah,
I think
100%, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the Bite by Bite program. That's what I achieved. That's what numerous people who have gone through the program have achieved themselves. We're all still achieving it. We're all still like, that's the beauty of it in this community, is that we're constantly going into those spaces where it's like, what does this mean? What meaning am I giving to this perception that I have right now? What meaning am I giving to this reaction? When you constantly go into that space, again, what you're capable of is limitless, essentially.
It's about having the courage to go into it. It's not easy work.
Yeah.
It's definitely not easy work.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, the clients that actually went through this program we have I don't know, now we've been running this program for a couple months now.
Yeah.
We had just completed it about three months ago, and we've had about 10 to 15 clients go through it, and all of them lost anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And it was because they had the courage to feel uncomfortable and go into that space. And the consequences of that decision,
right,
of learning about you,
right,
like literally learning about you and who you are as an individual, that decision, the consequences were amazing transformations.
yeah. And again, it's uncomfortable. When I first came here and I had my conversations initially with Mo and Rantis, I was like, ugh, feelings. This is a lot. This is a lot to uncover. This is a lot to unpack. And it was them pushing me constantly to go into that space, as much as I had pushback and resistance, because I knew what it was going to bring me. I knew it was that awareness that I was seeking to develop and that I gained. And that's what happens. That's what's going to happen. That's what we can promise you, right? That's why we made the big disclaimer in the beginning. It's like, we're not going to tell you just what to do. That's not what we're going to do. That's not how we're going to do it. We know the power in addressing your emotions. So the Bite program, just so you guys get a full idea of what it is, it's a 90-day program. It's an online course. And you watch your videos. You go day by day and you process everything, all those emotions and all of the implementing little habits here and there, week by week, that allow you to start developing and enhancing, fine-tuning that awareness, so that when you get to the real-ish, the real stuff, the real nutritional changes that happen later on, which I'm sure you all are seeking for initially with any program, right? When you get that, and you already have this developed,
yeah,
it's intense. So what we have today is a 50% discount on that program for you guys. If you're interested, Beverly is going to send the link for the program in the chat so you guys can check that out.
Yeah, so before we go into Q&A, let's just kind of go over a little bit of what we went through today. So let's just start from the beginning. What are emotions? Emotions are just suggestions. They're just they're feelings that allow us to understand and perceive the world in a certain way, to then act in that world that ensures our survival and ensures that we live, okay? Then after that, we have the emotional equation. The way that we perceive something, it's going to give us the emotion, which then leads to the action.
Right.
So what do we want to do? We want to create space between the way we see something and our emotion. That space is called awareness. That awareness allows us to see things differently, which then allow us to create a new emotion, and creating a new emotion creates a new aligned action, which is your logical brain. And then from there, like I said, the awareness is the one skill that you want to continuously develop. It's literally just allowing yourself to feel the emotions that you feel, because all of those emotions, that identity that you have, is the sum of your emotions for your entire life. Meaning, if you're 30 years old, you have millions of experiences that have millions of emotions that you categorize into a certain way and made Moses, made Evelyn. We need to really go into that space, understand those emotions, and question our perception of the world and who we are. And in this case, with this program and this masterclass, the food, the way that you eat, right? Because we're all different. We're all different human beings with different experiences. And that brings us to the entire, masterclass today, discussing on the emotions. So what I want to do now is open the floor to any questions or that you guys may have about learning more about emotions, going deeper into the philosophy that we have behind it, VidaPRO.
I think there's
a bunch of questions.
A bunch of comments.
All right, so let's start from the top. Beverly, I got a question. Can a person have emotional eating while eating healthy? Want to take that one?
Emotional eating while eating healthy. Yeah, for sure. You could be. There's times where I cook and I put together a fire healthy meal. So I love cooking and trying different new healthy recipes and meals. And when I finish, I'm so excited. I have that emotion of joy and excitement. There's even thrill because I just accomplished it and I achieved it and I eat it and I'm it's like a baby and giving her bottle.
Yeah, I think
that's how it is. Yeah.
I think for that point is, again, every action, the reason that you're deciding to eat healthy, right? Eat healthy foods is because this food is actually creating a positive emotion for you.
Yeah.
So you're going to take that action. So absolutely, when you're eating healthy is because the way that you perceive that food in that moment, the way that you're looking at it, is creating an amazing emotion for you. And that's why you enjoy eating healthy.
Then there's the opposite, which is what I did when I quit my job.
Exactly.
Which was I was emotionally eating, but not necessarily eating healthy, but I was okay with it because, again, I had the awareness where I was like, this is fine.
That was a really good question by Steven. Steven got another one. He got, can a person have emotional eating while losing someone that they are close to, like a loved one or close relative or close friend?
Yeah, I mean,
Steve's putting up bars.
yeah, he is. I mean, if you go to the breakup story right now.
Yeah, for sure. Like, actually, when I actually went into the nutrition program, it was the breakup story. So I had a really, really tough breakup in the end of 2018. It was around Christmas, New Year's, that time. And in 2019, I had a lot of questions about who I was as an individual, whether what I was doing was right here at VidaProject, all of these different things. And that nutrition program, Francis and I started kind of dabbling into this concept. And but this was before Evelyn came on board and helped us create the final, helped to create the final product. So now when I went into that space, I questioned a lot of the foods that I ate. So absolutely, I think whenever there is what we call here an ego death is when there is an intense emotional experience. A breakup is one of those things, or a death, a loss of a best friend, whatever it can be. It's that emotional experience that starts to question who we are, our identity. But it can go either way. It can go in a way that can, make the quality of your life decrease, or it can go in a way where it makes the quality of your life increase. For me, I was able to use that emotion. Luckily, I had Francis at that time who was there, who helped me create new perceptions and new perspectives. He helped me create that awareness. So therefore, I started to view the breakup differently, which allowed me to understand and use those emotions to create positive actions that aligned with the life that I wanted to live. Yeah. So absolutely, but it can go either way. Right? So
I think that was a great question, Steven. Christine, what if eating when you're not hungry due to emotions is repetitive? How would you classify this action from your emotions?
What if eating when you're not hungry
due to emotions is repetitive? So go ahead.
So I would say if that's happening, if you're eating when you're not hungry and you find that it's happening over and over again, there's obviously not an aligned action there. So if we go back to the equation, we have a perception, right? That maybe the perception is that if I eat this, I will achieve this emotion, right? I'll achieve happiness, I'll achieve joy. And then you have this unaligned reaction, right? So I would say going into that discomfort of, okay, questioning bite by bite, before you go and eat it, while you're eating it, third bite, fourth bite, fifth bite, and then afterwards, did you really achieve that emotion?
Yeah, that's definitely one way. Another way that you can do it, that I do it now, is, I decide not to eat. I literally force myself and go into a fast and say, I'm going to fast for 36 hours. And what happens is that you have no other choice but to deal with your emotions. And it's uncomfortable. It's like, anybody can come in here. If you come in here and ask anybody, Moses is fasting or Moses is emotional, it's like a tornado comes in.
Just kind of keeps himself.
Yeah, stays in
Put
there.
him in the room.
Don't touch him. Don't touch it.
It's not compute.
So yeah, I think that's a great question. How would you classify this action from your emotions?
I would say it's a reaction. Yeah.
I would say it's a reaction because there's emotions that haven't necessarily been acknowledged or understood, right? We haven't, the space between your emotion and the action that you're taking hasn't necessarily expanded in those moments when you do go ahead and eat, and then you're like, why did I just do that? Like, that I don't feel better, I feel worse, and then you just kind of do it over and over again. It's trying to achieve a happier emotion, right? And we're always seeking to like feel better, to those feel good emotions. And food is one of those ways to achieve instant gratification where we can get that emotion. But again, if you're not aligned with what those actual emotions are, it's gonna keep on, you'll go into this vicious cycle where there's a missing element, which is the awareness of those emotions that are driving the perception that say, if I eat this, I'm gonna feel better.
I think also it also has to do with your judgment on your emotion. So
Sure.
like you saw Evelyn put quotation marks around feeling that, right? It's because we classify an emotion of maybe being overwhelmed or stressed or sad or depressed as something negative that we shouldn't be experiencing.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing about being a human being is that's part of being a human being. Why are we feeling shame, or why are we starting to feel like we shouldn't feel that way?
Right.
We should feel that way.
Right.
It's a suggestion to help you survive. Your life feels threatened for whatever reason, maybe work, maybe a breakup, maybe you'll be feeling overwhelmed. So your body's trying to tell you something to be able to deal with it. Except these threats aren't necessarily a threat to our survival. We're still going to live.
Right.
So what we do is we create an action, a reaction to make us feel good because we feel like we always have to feel good.
Yeah.
But
And
go
you
ahead.
don't. And it's uncomfortable sometimes to accept and face the emotions that we're feeling. And so we ignore them. We don't acknowledge them. We don't go into that space with them because we judge ourselves for those emotions. And like Mo said, like we are emotional beings. There's no hiding that.
No.
There's no masking that. One way it will show itself. You'll blow up, or again, you'll find yourself doing something that's not serving you, and you're like, what the heck? What's happening here? We're emotional beings, and and those emotions are there. When your heart rate starts going, or you start having like physical reactions to these emotions, that's the space to go into. It's uncomfortable. It takes vulnerability. It takes courage. It's probably one of the bravest things to do, aside from the things that we do every day. Show up to work, be a great parent, be a leader. The bravest thing to do is to go into your emotions, go into those spaces. As uncomfortable they may be, you just have to know in those spaces, this too shall pass.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely 100% true, and couldn't have said it better. Stephen came out with another fire question.
Oh, snap.
Can a person experience emotional eating while discovering their sexual orientation?
I have to read that one again. Can a person experience emotional eating while discovering their sexual orientation? Yeah, I think 100%.
Yeah.
That's tough. That's a big shift and change for somebody. I mean, I can't identify what the emotions are exactly. I've never been through it myself, but I could only imagine it's scary. I can only imagine being shooken up when I'm like discovering is what I believed about myself different.
Yeah, and it's literally what's happening when you're questioning your sexual orientation, or you're discovering your sexual orientation, is that you're literally starting to question your identity. You're trying to find out, is this really who I am?
Right.
So all the 30 plus years that or 20 plus years that you've been alive, it's like, oh shit, man, this is not me.
Right.
And now you're changing that space, that perception of who you are. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So absolutely, someone dealing with those emotions can literally eat their feelings while they're going through something like that.
So I think that's our last question. Do we have any more questions? You guys have any more questions?
Anything you want to say? We got like a couple more minutes before we head on out.
So Andrea said, in today's world with pandemic, quarantine, etc., certain unhealthy habits may have developed. What do you believe is the first best step is to be able to break out of this cycle, especially since the circumstances around us may have not changed?
That's some real life ish.
Yeah.
It's, the times have definitely changed within this past year. I think obesity rates have got like just
Shot
fired up this
down
past
like
year.
46%.
And so it's a real thing. And it's one thing, it's like, not going into that space of judgment because of what's happening around us. Our environment is literally changing. We have to kind of be in that space where it's like, oh, I have all these emotions. I can't really like go hang out with my friends all the time, or I can't go to work every day and socialize with other people and distract myself from dealing with those emotions, right? So most people, again, don't know how to deal with it. So you go into that space of eating your feelings again. And I think what we've been talking about this whole masterclass, it's just the awareness in those spaces without judgment, right? It's without judgment. What's coming up? I know for me, I went through that experience when I had COVID in September. And again, coming from structure, willpower, discipline, and then all of that taken away from me, I was like, oh,
Mhm.
who am I? What do I do? You know, like just feeling lost. Like because I didn't have all these other things to validate who I was, to give me that sense of security, to give me that grounding. And I went through a whirlwind of emotions, and it wasn't until I understood, oh, I judged myself for being in this space. I judged myself for resting. I remember talking to Mo, and he was like, dude, stop judging yourself. And I was just like, oh, he's like, yeah, it's like, oh, it's okay to rest. And I was like, okay, that was it. I was able to identify right then and there that I was judging myself. Yeah.
One thing, Andrea, is that with the pandemic and the quarantine, what that created for everybody in the world is uncertainty. And when we don't know what's going to happen, especially with something that we don't have control over, or we think that we may have control over, but we have control over nothing, ideally. This pandemic and quarantine made us realize that like there's a lot of uncertainty in this world, and to deal with that space of not knowing what's going to happen, of course, people are going to eat their way out of it. So again, awareness is the big thing, but awareness with being uncomfortable with being comfortable with the uncertainty is even more powerful. If you can get into that space and say like, you know what, I'm ready to take life on, and I'm ready to deal with the negative, the positive, the good, the bad, everything that comes with uncertainty, like that's going to be an emotional driver to create healthy habits and action.
Yeah, I think it goes into radical acceptance, right? When you can just radically accept that, okay, this is happening in the world. I cannot control the outcome of this, right? Which is what we all seek to strive for. Because it gives us certainty, right? It goes into that like kind of fight or flight response. Can I protect myself or can I not protect myself? And right now, we can't necessarily protect ourselves. We can do our best. We can try, but essentially we can't. So when you go into that space of just radical acceptance of no control, it's almost like a surrendering, kind of feeling. You go into that and you say, well, what can this do for me, right? What can this serve me? I call it the green light. Matthew McConaughey just wrote a book on that. He called it the green light. And he's like, what's in every situation, as awful as it may sound, a pandemic where literally thousands and thousands of people are dying daily, even in a moment like that, what's my green light? Where's my green light? So just finding when you're in that space of just sorrow or just feeling hopeless or, it's like, I have no control over this. It's radical acceptance, I feel, is the first step. And then where's my green light?
Yeah, I love that. Stephen asked, can a person discipline themselves from emotional eating? So I think it goes back to what we discussed. It's what is the intention behind that discipline, right? Is that discipline going to just translate to a better looking body? Or is that discipline going to translate into just understanding your emotions? Because when I think about discipline, it's really about when I think about people who are disciplined, they just know their emotions. They're not judging anything. They're not judging the bad or the good. They're just going into that space and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. But when we try to forcefully discipline ourselves, like Evelyn did that one time, right? Or like maybe you guys
I still do it.
Yeah.
Even this day, I have to catch myself. I'm like, whoa, I'm still going. I still go into that space where I have my emotional brain is just completely turned off, and I have to.
It has to be a mixture of both. Like you can go too far into that discipline, and are you really going to enjoy life?
Right.
Like, that's the real question. Are you going to enjoy life? Right. What's the intention behind your behavior? What's the emotion behind that action? So that you can create alignment between the goal that you have, that your logical brain is putting forward, and the emotional brain that drives that goal forward.
Yeah.
All right, guys. If we don't have any more questions, we'll end it here. But what we wanted to do is remind you that the Bite program is a 90-day program that, like Evelyn said, builds awareness with our emotions. That's the biggest thing. That's what everybody talked about. It has a bunch of other stuff in terms of nutritional information that is absolutely fire on the research that we have done.
Gives you that guidance.
Yes.
It does give you application and all of that helps the process,
It
right?
helps align that emotional and logical brain.
Mhm.
Like I said, today it's going to be 50% off,
Mhm.
right? So usually $600. It's $300 today. If you're not really sure about the program, you can go to the website link we have where we're
Yes.
collecting information. You can ask for a free consultation. If you're thinking that nutrition is not the way for you, then maybe we should go into the what's it called, to consultation, and maybe fitness and stuff can be like that for you. And then the last one is the community.
Yeah, Mighty Networks community. Beverly sent that link out there. So if conversations like this intrigue you, you find yourself asking questions like this, definitely join that community, join our community, come hang out with us here at VidaProject, and let's continue the conversation to becoming limitless.
Guys, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for joining us today, sharing this space with us today. We had an awesome time.